time we ended with talking about concentrated animal feedlot operations and free range. So concentrated animal feedlots, let's do some popsicle sticks just for funsies. And the answer we got there, so don't feel intimidated. So what is a benefit of a concentrated feedlot? This one is going to Gage. So what's the benefit of a concentrated feedlot? Gage, yeah.
Sorry, can you ask the question?
So what's one benefit of a concentrated feedlot? So what is one thing that is going to be a positive from this?
Can you go back?
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. All right, this one is now going to Carter. So what's the benefit of a concentrated feedlot?
It's cheaper.
Cheaper, absolutely, right? You have a lot of cows in one area, so it's super cheap. Let's do another one. Owen. Is Owen not here today? Need to make sure I mark him as not here. Okay. Will Smith. Where are you sitting, man? I know you're here because I saw you come in. There you are. Okay. What's another benefit? So we said it's less expensive. What's another benefit of a concentrated food lot? Yeah, you get more output for less land, right? Less land, bigger output. So if those are the benefits, Gage, what's a negative thing about a concentrated feedlot? So all these cows are really close together, so what's going to happen if one of them gets sick? Yeah, so all of them, like, actually overgrazing is a big one that I wasn't talking about, but yeah, overgrazing. So if you have a lot of animals in one area, you actually can overgraze an area and turn it into a desert. So you can destroy the ecosystem. That's a great negative one. Sounds great and weird saying great and negative in the same breath. Let's get one more negative of concentrated feedlots. This one's going to Rachel. Yeah, what's the negative of a concentrated feedlot? Yep, no one said it yet, but you're right. So because they're so close together and diseases spread really quickly when there's a large population, they pre-feed them antibiotics to stop them from getting sick, which means there's antibiotics in our food, which is not great. So let's go to free-range lots now. So what's a positive of a free-range lot? Brianna's not here. Lucy, what's a positive of a free range? Perfect. More humane, less bad for the environment, right? So the animals actually have space where they can live. They're not crammed together. And the manure that comes off does not tend to pollute surface water or runoff water because it just goes into the soil and the soil gets rich from it. What's a drawback of a free-range lot? This one is going to Jake.
Less production.
Yeah, less production, which means the meat's going to be more expensive. Awesome. Okay, now they're feeling good about that. Let's talk about overgrazing, which is something that Gage brought up. So when we have animals in a very concentrated area, we tend to have something called overgrazing. So overgrazing occurs when too many animals feed on a particular area of land. Overgrazing causes loss of vegetation, which leads to soil erosion. So we talked about soil erosion before, that we talked about it when we talked about the health of a watershed, right? That when you have less plants in place, there's nothing to hold the soil. So the roots of the plants are there to hold the soil. When those roots are not there, the soil can just erode. And we know that the top layer of the soil, or the organic horizon, the O horizon of the soil, is the most important. That's what actually allows plants to grow. It's what sustains life. And so when those roots are gone and we're not holding that O horizon anymore, it gets washed away, which means nothing else can grow there. So that also leads to something called desertification. So desertification is taking a healthy ecosystem and turning it into a desert by the loss of soil from overgrazing. Bless you. So you can see right here, I love this picture. You can see this is like a grassland, shrubland over here. But because of overgrazing on this other side of the fence, it's legitimately a desert. Because we have taken the plants off of the ground, they are no longer holding the soil, it cannot sustain very good life, and so it turns itself into an actual desert. So maybe still need this slide. So, a a thing that farmers tend to do when they have a lot of animals in one area, or if you're using a feedlot, since there's a lot more space, they do something called rotational grazing. So rotational grazing would be called a mitigation strategy, or a strategy to mitigate what's going on. So the idea of rotational grazing is you have 3 different lots that you're going to be using. One lot is where the animals are currently in. One lot is where they're going to be going next, and then you have one lot out of rotation to kind of grow the vegetation back so that it doesn't become unhealthy. So the idea is that after these cows are done grazing here, say we have like a month in each pasture, you're going to move the cows to pasture 2. So pasture 2, it's been the longest since cows have been on it, so it is the most healthy, and that gives pasture 1 a month to kind of start regrowing. After they're done with pasture 2, they're going to go to pasture 3. Now pasture 1 is going to get 1 extra month of regrowing, so it's going to be nice and healthy for when we rotate again. And pasture 2, since it was already just grazed on, it starts to grow back. So the idea is that you give each section time to grow back, and so that you're not taking all of the plants and the nutrients out of the soil and you don't have desertification. So they have this for cows and for livestock. They also have something called rotational planting that farmers do as well. So just like we don't want to take all the nutrients and all the plants out of the area where the animals are eating, when it comes to rotational planting, you don't want to take all the minerals out of the soil, and different plants take different minerals out of the soil. So this is an idea we're actually going to come back to when we talk about farming and different farming practices. So, just some information. We talked about the tragedy of the commons last time, and we talked about how the United States is our commons. Oops, ran into my board. And that the majority of the land in the United States is used for cow production, right? For holding livestock. Just for funsies, to let you guys know, because they do talk about this a lot on the AP test, just like the broad idea of this, is that if you were to eat, let's see, we're doing 1 kilogram of produce. So 1 kilogram of apples takes about 700 liters. 1 kilogram of potatoes takes about 900 liters of water. 1 kilogram of bread is 1,300 liters. 1 kilogram of soybeans, 1,800 liters. 1 kilogram of eggs, 3,300 liters. 1 kilogram of chicken, 3,900 liters. 1 kilogram of pork, 4,800 liters. 1 kilogram of cheese, 5,000 liters. 1 kilogram of red meat, 15,500 liters of water. So the idea is that because we are growing, well, first of all, because we have so much land for these animals, they take up a lot of land that could be used for growing food. The second thing is, what was the second biggest chunk of land used? So we had our chunk of land for the cows. What was the second biggest chunk of land used for? Do you remember? Yeah, Katie.
Food for the cows.
Food for the cows, right? So not only are we losing land for the cows, we are losing land to create the food for the cows. So not only do the cows have to drink, and not only do we have to make sure they have space, but we also have to use that water to create the food to feed the cows. And so when we're looking at this, there's actually more water used per kilogram of produce, meaning meat or veggies or whatever it is, because there's cheese on this too. Red meat uses the absolute most. So less consumption of meat could reduce carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrogen monoxide emissions, conserve water, reduce the use of antibiotics and growth hormones, and improve topsoil. So at the very end of this unit, we're going to be talking about sustainability. So just to remember what sustainability is, last time we talked about how sustainability is using something at a rate where you're not going to run out of it, right? And so we have to make sure we're being sustainable with our food, with our water, and so on. And so going into the usage of meat, not only are you using a lot of meat, but you're also using a lot of water to create that meat. And so we're going to, at the very end, talk about sustainable eating. Now, I'm not here to preach everyone has to be a vegetarian or a vegan, because I am not a vegetarian, nor am I a vegan. I like my burgers. I had a burger yesterday. But just being aware of how much meat we are consuming and where that meat actually comes from. So, now we're going to go to fishing. This is what our activity was about last time. So, fishing is something that about 20% of the world's population derives at least 1/5 of its annual protein intake from fish. So there's a lot of countries that have to have fish. Fish is their actual livelihood. For us in Utah, Like, fish is a delicacy, it's fun. I mean, if you go fishing, you're probably gonna get rainbow trout. But, like, if you get sushi or if you go to Popeyes, which is, like, the first place I can think of, but that's chicken. It's not even fish. But it's fine. If you do get fish, it's more of, like, a fun thing. It's not what we sustain ourselves on. In Utah, we usually sustain ourselves on, like, pork, chicken, and beef. Like, those are the main meats. But some places, like islands and countries that live next to the ocean, the majority of their protein actually does come from fish, which leads us to this idea. Overfishing, which we experienced last time. So overfishing is one of the most significant drivers of declines in ocean wildlife populations. So people tend to take too many fish out of the oceans, and so it destroys the whole entire ecosystem of the ocean. So to me, the saddest thing about overfishing is the overfishing practices. So, how it goes is, it's not that there's a million people sitting on the edge of boats and they have fishing poles and they're just catching their fish and reeling them in. How commercial people fish is they have big nets, and on the bottom of those nets are weights. So they throw these nets over the side of their boat, the weights pull them down to the bottom of the ocean, and then they just pull everything together and pull everything up from the ecosystem. So this is called trawling, Trolling, I believe is how it's spelled. But the idea is that it basically scrapes the bottom of the ocean and pulls everything up with it. The big problem with that is we get a lot of stuff called bycatch. So bycatch is the unwanted sea life when fishing for a different species. So when they trawl, they'll throw their nets over the boat, it'll hit the bottom of the ocean, it'll pull everything in. You're gonna pull in a lot of anemones, you're gonna pull in a lot of coral, you're gonna pull in a lot of sponges. Those three things don't make for good eating. You're also gonna pull in a lot of fish that you don't want. So not only is that bad because you're catching them, but fishermen are not the most gentle of catch and releasers. Their boats are going really, really quickly, and they just take the stuff and they throw it back into the water, and when it hits the water, it usually dies. So not only are they destroying ecosystems, but they are killing the bycatch that they do catch when they return it back to the water. And so that is leaving a big ecosystem decline in the oceans because of our fishing practices. So because of that, we have extreme scarcity of some fish species, less biodiversity and population health, damages to entire aquatic ecosystems, and harm to people who depend on fishing for food and commerce. So all of the people that go and fish in open water, that it's just, not necessary for survival, they just do it for income. There are individuals that need those fish for survival, so it really does harm the people that need that to actually survive. So, a mitigation strategy for overfishing. We'll come watch this at the very end. Is aquaculture. So people have realized that overfishing is becoming a problem, and so they've started doing aquaculture. So aquaculture is the breeding, raising, and harvesting of fish, shellfish, and aquatic plants. I believe we actually have an aquaculture class here at Skyridge that Mr. Smith teaches about raising fish and aquatic things for food production. So basically it's like farming but with fish. So, U.S. aquaculture is an environmentally responsible source of food and commercial products. It helps to create healthier habitats and is used for rebuilding stocks of threatened or endangered species. So by basically growing these animals and having a farm for them, we reduce the amount of bycatch because we're only catching the fish that we want because we're growing them. We reduce the amount of fossil fuels used in the fishing boats. We reduce the amount of overfishing that is happening. We reduce the amount of damage to the environment. And it's really popular because it requires really few resources. All you need is an area of water. So this is what aquaculture looks like. So you have fish farming where there's usually a net in open water and you put the fish that you're growing in there. You have algae farming, so like if you like seaweed around your sushi, that's there. Or if you're weird like my brother-in-law and just like to eat raw seaweed for funsies, Dane. That's what it's for. And then we also have mussels, so like clams, oysters, things like that are also grown in an aquaculture environment. So, we talked about the benefits of aquaculture, but there always are going to be a couple of drawbacks of aquaculture as well. So the first one is water contamination from fish waste. If you have a whole crap ton of fish, pardon the pun, in one area and they're very concentrated, you're going to have a lot of fish waste in that area, which means that the water is going to get contaminated really easily. So a lot of fish in one area creates a lot of fish poop, which means that the environment is going to have to deal with that. We're going to have a lot of nitrogenous waste, and that nitrogenous waste, remember when nitrogen gets into waterways, what can it also create? Bacteria, and what's that green stuff we find in our Utah lake? Algae blooms, yeah. So it's a limiting factor, and so it can cause other ecosystem problems. Number 2 is escape of non-native fish species. So some fish species decide they want to be Jason Bourne and they want to get out of the net and fly the coop. Problem with that is that if we're growing these fish in areas where they're not native, we're going to have a lot of invasive species problems. So we might be introducing an animal into an ecosystem that doesn't belong there, and it might start out competing other fish for the resources. The third one is predator control problems. I don't know about you, if I was an animal and I ate fish, and I happened upon an area where fish literally could not run away because they're in a net, sounds like good eating to me. So a lot of predators will find these fish farms and they will attack them because there's a lot of fish in a small area that can't run away. Introduction of regional diseases. So again, if these fish are in an area where they don't belong, they might have diseases that are really common to them, but to the region they're being grown in, they're not common. And so they can start introducing diseases into populations that never had the disease in the first place. And then last but not least, introduction of chemical elements into a natural ecosystem. So again, we're going to start having fish that are being fed antibiotics because you have a lot of fish in a small area and you don't want them to get sick. And so we're going to have different chemicals introduced into different ecosystems, like if a fish escapes, or if you put antibiotics into the water, it doesn't mean that the fish are the only ones that are going to get it. There's other species that can also uptake that antibiotic. And then any other chemicals they use to like try to clean the water or try to promote healthy ecosystems because of the disruption that they make. Alright, so we're going to watch our overfishing video and then we're going to do our cookie mining. If I can find the video. Goodness.
Fish are in trouble. The cod population off Canada's east coast collapsed in the 1990s. Intense recreational and commercial fishing has decimated Goliath grouper populations in South Florida. And most populations of tuna have plummeted by over 50%, with the southern Atlantic bluefin on the verge of extinction. Those are just a couple of many examples. Overfishing is happening all over the world. How did this happen? When some people think of fishing, they imagine relaxing in a boat and patiently reeling in the day's catch. But modern industrial fishing, the kind that stocks our grocery shelves, looks more like warfare. In fact, the technologies they employ were developed for war. Radar, sonar, helicopters, and spotter planes are all used to guide factory ships towards dwindling schools of fish. Long lines with hundreds of hooks or huge nets round up massive amounts of fish, along with other species like seabirds, turtles, and dolphins. And fish are hauled up onto giant boats, complete with onboard flash freezing and processing facilities. All of these technologies have enabled us to catch fish at greater depths and farther out at sea than ever before. And as the distance and depth of fishing have expanded, so has the variety of species we target. For example, the Patagonian toothfish neither sounds nor looks very appetizing, and fishermen ignored it until the late 1970s. Then it was rebranded and marketed to chefs in the US as Chilean sea bass, despite the animal actually being a type of cod. Soon it was popping up in markets all over the world and is now a delicacy. Unfortunately, these deep water fish don't reproduce until they're are at least 10 years old, making them extremely vulnerable to overfishing when the young are caught before they've had a chance to spawn.
So what kind of species does that make them? An R-selected or K-selected species? K-selected, perfect.
Consumer tastes and prices can also have harmful effects. For example, shark fin soup is considered such a delicacy in China and Vietnam that the fin has become the most profitable part of the shark. This leads many fishermen to fill their boats with fins, leaving millions of dead sharks behind. The problems aren't unique to toothfish and sharks. Almost 31% of the world's fish populations are overfished, and another 58% are fished at the maximum sustainable level. Wild fish simply can't reproduce as fast as 7 billion people can eat them. Fishing also has impacts on broader ecosystems. Wild shrimp are typically caught by dragging nets the size of a football field along the ocean bottom, disrupting or destroying seafloor habitats. The catch is often as little as 5% shrimp. The rest is bycatch, unwanted animals that are thrown back dead.
So 95% of their
Coastal
catch is
shrimp
thrown back
farming
dead.
Isn't much better. Mangroves are bulldozed to make room for shrimp farms, robbing coastal communities of storm protection and natural water filtration, and depriving fish of key nursery habitats. So what does it look like to give fish a break and let them recover? Protection can take many forms. In national waters, governments can set limits about how, when, where, and how much fishing occurs, with restrictions on certain boats and equipment. Harmful practices such as bottom trawling can be banned altogether, and we can establish marine reserves closed to all fishing to help ecosystems restore themselves. There's also a role for consumer awareness and boycotts to reduce wasteful practices like shark finning and push fishing industries towards more sustainable practices. Past interventions have successfully helped depleted fish populations recover. There are many solutions. The best approach for each fishery must be considered based on science, respect for the local communities that rely on the ocean, and for fish as wild animals. And then the rules must be enforced. International collaboration is often needed too, because fish don't care about our borders. We need to end overfishing. Ecosystems, food security, jobs, economies, and coastal cultures all depend on it.
All right. So now we are going to switch our learning from the use of space for creating food, the use of space